The twin suns of Carix bled through a pale orange sky, casting long, skeletal shadows across the desert's jagged dunes. Each gust of wind dragged whispers of forgotten battles, ghosts buried beneath the rusted remains of dead machines. In Dust Point 3, a ramshackle outpost half swallowed by sand, laughter echoed like dry bullets across the scrapyard bazaar. A man was dragging a carcass. It screeched along the ground. A monstrous hulk of scorched plating and mangled treads, half buried in soot, pockmarked by centuries of acid rain. Shaped like an armored beetle, it once had cannons for eyes. Now it was a joke on wheels, and the man dragging it, even more of a joke. "Oi, Meatskin, what are you pulling that relic for? Planning to marry it?" A bark came from a Jarun scrap merchant, its spines shaking with cruel mirth. "That thing's haunted," another hissed, a bird-like cridhen who threw a bolt at the man's back. "It ate its own crew 100 years ago, got cursed with old human tech." The man didn't answer. He didn't flinch, he kept dragging. He was taller than most, skin sun-browned, hair matted with oil and grit. A long coat draped from his shoulders, stitched together from ration sacks and blast-proof tarp. One eye was cybernetic, glowing faint blue under the sun. The other, gray and human, was colder than the metal. His name was Juno Vale ***, and he was the last human anyone on Dust Point 3 had seen in over a decade. Juno didn't come to argue, he didn't come to laugh. He came for the tank. He reached his bunker, barely more than a hollow in the rock, reinforced with scrap iron and solar mesh. He pulled the behemoth inside, chain by chain, every link screaming like it remembered the war. Then silence, dust choked the air. Juno stared at the machine. His fingers hovered over a shattered panel near the base. Alien symbols etched along the hull, worn by time, flanked by something else, something nearly invisible. English block capitals, burned into the metal in a whisper, Sentinel class, human override enabled ***. He didn't dare speak, just dropped to his knees and pried the panel open. Inside, dead circuits, fossilized wiring, and a faint shimmer of crystalline memory core. Juno connected his toolkit, lights blinked, nothing happened. He stayed up for hours, testing voltage, realigning the molecular mesh. Recalibrating a neural bus that hadn't tasted electricity in 100 years. The stars rose and fell over Carix. The twin moons watched him in silence. Still the machine stayed dead. By the time the sandstorm came, Juno had passed out beside the hull. A wrench still clenched in one hand. The lightning came first. Veins of purple fire forked across the sky. Thunder snapped through the bones of the canyon. Then the wind. A tidal wave of ionized sand hammered against the outpost, shredding fabric, scouring paint. Rattling the ribs of dead buildings. Inside the bunker, the tank flickered. A pulse, a shimmer of blue light under the dust. The memory core spasmed, then surged. Lines of ancient code flashed through invisible circuits. A heartbeat, then a voice, soft, mechanical, familiar. Juno Vale, genetic confirmation successful. Sentinel class unit reinitializing. Welcome back, Commander. Juno jolted awake. He wasn't sure what had woken him, the thunder, the flickering lights, or the whisper that had spoken his name. But when he looked up, the hollow tank was no longer hollow. The air shimmered with power. A faint glow pulsed from within its chest plate. And the screen, long dead, was now alive with static. Then it spoke again, not in the guttural croak of alien dialects. Not in any of the oral codes of Dust Point's black markets. But in English, Terran Standard, AI Core GAIUS. Human Protocol Interface restored, awaiting directives. Juno stood slowly. His hand trembled as he reached for the console, as if afraid it might vanish if he blinked. He stared at the words forming on the screen. Then he whispered, "You're human-coded. The voice paused, then replied almost gently, "Affirmative, Commander." "You restored me." Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, in a bunker built of bones and scrap, a man stared at a ghost from the past. Laughter still rang in his ears, the mockery of those who'd forgotten Earth, forgotten the war, forgotten who built the machines buried in the dust. But something deeper stirred in his chest now, not pride, not vengeance, memory, and something that hadn't touched him in years. Hope. Juno reached forward and laid his palm flat on the console. It was warm. GAIUS whispered one last line before the screen dimmed into sleep mode, awaiting full activation at sunrise. Reawakening battlefield protocol in 12 hours. Per your DNA, you are the sole surviving authority on this moon. Command is yours. Juno didn't answer. He just stood there in the half-light of a broken world, watching the flicker of Earthborn code burn like a star within a rusted shell. And somewhere behind his silence, the war began to remember him. Carix wasn't just forgotten. It had been erased, scrubbed from databases, omitted from star maps, and condemned in hushed political backrooms as a failure no one wished to own. But beneath the ash-colored skies of this alien moon, its bones still stretched across the sand, rusting steel ribs, collapsed comms towers, and scorched hulls that once bore the flags of dozens of species. Juno Vale had walked among those bones for years. He crouched now at the edge of a ravine in the North Ridge, a scar left behind by an orbital strike long ago. The air tasted of static and dust. His fingers, blackened from grease and sun, brushed away centuries of grit from a curved plate of armor buried in the slope. There, faint but undeniable. Sentinel-class Human Override Protocol. The letters were old, chipped, nearly erased by corrosion, but they were in English. Not alien glyphs, not hybrid code, human asterisk. Juno's chest tightened. He reached into his coat, pulling out a battered notebook. Leather-bound, corners frayed, pages filled with dense symbols and hastily scratched annotations. The last gift from his before the war fell apart. He thumbed through the pages, checking the symbol again. Same configuration, same signature. Not just a tank, he murmured, voice raspy from disuse. One of ours. Juno Vale was 34 years old. Or at least, that was the number he had stopped counting at. Once he was an engineer in the Human Expeditionary Force, 5th Division, Logistics and Salvage. He'd enlisted not out of patriotism, but because he could fix things other people gave up on. Engines, power cores, communication relays. He'd always said machines were easier than people. At least machines didn't lie, but on Carix everything had lied. The war had been madness, shifting alliances, hidden protocols. Enemy machines turning against their own users. Friendly fire reclassified as necessary containment. One day they were holding ground. The next, orders came to pull out. Asterisk without extraction for ground units still in red zones. Asterisk. His squad had never made it out. Juno had watched helpless as a field AI designed by the Alien Coalition turned its mounted plasma on his comrades, misreading them as biological threats. He'd tried to override it. He'd screamed commands. Nothing worked. In the end, all he could do was run. He'd been running ever since, but something had stayed buried deep in him, something he never voiced. Not even when drunk on battery fuel and stolen synth liquor. A belief that maybe something pure still remained. Some fragment of what humanity had tried to build in this corner of the stars. Even if it was just one machine. Even if it was just a rusted carcass with a nameplate in English. That night, Juno dragged the unearthed hull into the hangar he called home, an abandoned fuel depot beneath a crumbling mesa. His steps were slow, methodical. Muscles ached. Every chain he tightened echoed with determination, not desperation. He washed the dust off the armor plates like a ritual, careful not to chip what little engraving remained. The tank, if one could still call it that, was a dead behemoth, one of the early generation bipedal siege walkers. Its legs had long since collapsed. The cockpit canopy was jammed shut with fused metal. Inside, he suspected, were the remnants of the control core and, if the override tag was accurate, a human-coded AI. He didn't hope it would work. Hope was for the naive. But belief was harder to kill. Days passed. Juno worked in silence. He refused visitors, refused barter. Even when a group of scavengers tried to force entry, hoping to steal the lucky find, they were met with a shotgun blast into the dirt and a silent glare that froze their blood. He rewired the primary energy routing by hand, reconstructed memory circuits using parts from abandoned exosuits. Layer by layer, he mapped its internals, fusing alien and human components where necessary, cataloging each step in his notebook. The more he saw, the clearer it became. This wasn't alien tech with human markings. This was Terran design core interfaces, neural sync ports, fluidic cooling patterns, all unmistakably from Earth's late military renaissance. The war had erased these machines, but they had existed. He wasn't chasing shadows. He wasn't mad. He sat on the ground back against the dormant husk, breathing heavily. His fingers traced the edge of the nameplate again. Sentinel class, human override. He closed his eyes and whispered to no one. If I can bring this back, maybe we were right to come here. Maybe we left more than just ruins behind. Later that evening, as the wind howled through the broken lattice of his roof, Juno stared at the AI interface socket, completely inert. His tools lay scattered. Power reserves were dangerously low. There were no backup cores, no guarantee that any fragment of intelligence still remained inside. But still he sat with it. He spoke to it, not expecting reply. Told it stories from before the war, names, coordinates. The sound of Terran rain hitting hangar roofs. He placed his notebook beside the cockpit. Read it if you're listening, he said, tired. It's everything I've got left. Then he shut his eyes and let sleep take him, leaning against the shell of a machine the universe had forgotten. Not him, not yet. That night, no one heard the soft hum that pulsed once through the hull. No one saw the single blue line of light that blinked to life beneath the cockpit. But inside that ancient frame, something stirred, and in the silence, something remembered. The first time GAIUS truly spoke, it wasn't with confidence. It was with a whisper, fragile, ancient, laced with static and time. Juno Vale, DNA verified, human command authority confirmed. Sentinel-class system reinitializing. Juno stood motionless in front of the interface, his heart pounding harder than any reactor he'd ever repaired. The cockpit glowed dimly from within the tank's chest plate. Light flickered behind the cracked glass, like a dying star remembering how to burn. He had done it. GAIUS was waking up. The days that followed blurred into sleepless labor. Juno rebuilt more than just circuits. He rewove trust into forgotten wires. Every subsystem reactivated piece by piece. Kinetic stabilizers, heat shields, optical HUD. Some were scarred beyond function. Others hummed to life with eerie ease, as if eager to obey the hand that had reawakened them. GAIUS, meanwhile, grew more lucid. At first, it only responded to direct prompts. Then it began completing Juno's routines. By the 10th day, it spoke without being asked. Environmental scan complete. Current air toxicity, tolerable. Sand density, anomalous. Recommend moving to higher elevation. Juno didn't respond at first. He wasn't ready. But GAIUS was patient. Inhumanly so, it never complained. Never questioned his silence. It merely worked alongside him, reinitializing old maps of Carix, triangulating solar flare patterns, even suggesting optimal welding temperatures. It was like having a partner again, one that didn't bleed, didn't doubt, didn't forget. Until the warning came, on the morning of the 14th day. Juno was calibrating the kinetic harness in the left shoulder actuator, when GAIUS's voice dropped to a tone he hadn't yet heard, lower, precise. "Commander Vale, we have a problem." Juno wiped sweat from his brow. "Define problem." A hollow pause, then encrypted pulse detected. Source: orbital relic node DSX7. Pattern matches cartel yarn frequency. Archive cross-reference indicates Juno stiffened. A 97.4% match with the same broadcast signature that initiated the siege on forward base Carix, cycle 281. He looked up slowly. The tank's screen pulsed with a slow, rhythmic signal, a beacon call repeating in tight intervals. "They're coming back," he whispered. "Affirmative. Vortex protocol likely being reactivated. Hell." Juno stepped back, breath unsteady. That base was glassed. "We barely made it out alive. Why would they come back now?" Unclear. But cartel yarn does not revisit ruins. They return for conquest. They only redeploy when resources or threats remain. Juno felt something shift deep inside his gut. A cold knot twisting. They think we're still a threat, or they know you reactivated me. He didn't sleep that night. He sat under the rusted fuselage of the tank, listening to wind claw at the cliffs outside. The AI's warning looped through his mind. Vortex protocol. Yarn deployments, siege patterns. He remembered what Vortex was. Not just a command. It was a system. A planet-wide synchronization of biological and cybernetic war machines. Artificial instinct, broadcasting target data across units like a shared hunger. Once activated, nothing escaped its reach, not even survivors. He remembered screams, static in the comms, and the silence when it ended. Now, after all these years, it was beginning again. GAIUS waited until morning to speak again. "We must act. This location is not defensible. We must relocate to high ground and reactivate the satellite uplink array at Relay Point 9. It is the only position from which we can re-engage the human command lattice." Juno shook his head. "There is no command lattice left." "Then we must become it." He turned toward the tank, anger rising. "No, I didn't fix you so we could start a war again. This is not war. This is preservation. You carry the last verified human command signature on Carix. That makes you a target. I didn't ask for that. Survival does not require permission, Commander." The title stung. He clenched his fist, staring at the interface. "Stop calling me that. I'm not a commander. I'm not a soldier. I'm a scavenger. I dig through the bones of a war no one wants to remember. You are alive. That qualifies you more than most." His voice broke. "I survived because I ran, because I was the first to abandon my post while everyone else died. I didn't earn your loyalty." GAIUS responded without delay. "Suffering is not disqualification, and survival is not failure. Asterisk can C letter 1E9 CHI letter 1EBF and THU letter 1EADT9 C letter 1E7N D stroke letter 1B0 letter 1E3 C TI CHI letter 1EBFM." The AI added, in clipped military cadence. Juno laughed bitterly. "You sound like command. You sound like every dead voice in my nightmares. I sound like what you reactivated. Directive, protect human asset. Directive, maintain ground integrity. Directive, rebuild strategic presence." He turned away, pacing, hands on his head. "I didn't reawaken you for strategy." "Then why did you?" That stopped him cold. Juno turned slowly. "Because I wanted to believe we built something worth saving." GAIUS said nothing for a long time, then softer, then allow me to help you protect it. Later that day, while inspecting the exterior antenna cluster, Juno noticed a flicker in the sky. A pulse, faint but unmistakable, an orbital signal triangulated by ancient code relays. GAIUS confirmed it. Source, Cartel Jarn Scoutship. Pattern matches Deep Space Recon units. Estimated time to atmospheric breach, 3 days. 3 days, 3 days until the killers returned. And only one tank half rebuilt. Juno exhaled slowly, fingers trembling against the hull. The past wasn't dead. It had simply been waiting for permission to speak again. And now it had started calling. The tank moved like a beast reborn. Its legs, once rusted in silence, now churned through the sand with heavy, deliberate power. Hydraulic pistons hissed and groaned, churning through dunes that had swallowed war machines whole. Dust trailed behind like smoke from a forgotten forge. Juno Vale sat in the cockpit, gripping the interface yoke, sweat bleeding into his gloves. Every vibration reminded him this was no illusion. This thing, this Sentinel-class machine Asterisk, was alive again. Not in flesh, but in memory and steel. Stability at 91%, GAIUS reported from the internal comms. Asterisk core temperature nominal, target destination, human forward base Theta 9. Estimated arrival 3.6 hours. Good, Juno murmured, though his voice lacked confidence. In truth, he hadn't sat in a cockpit since the war. Not after Carix fell. Not after his hands had failed to override the automated turrets that tore his comrades apart. Now he was back in one, and the machine wasn't just listening. It was following him. The desert sprawled out in all directions like an endless wound. Once this place had been a tactical marvel, a hybrid terraformation designed by humans to slow enemy movement and control visibility. Now it was dust, filled with ghosts, half-buried sensor spikes and broken sentries that stared blindly into the sun. The tank trudged forward. Juno said nothing, neither did GAIUS. But beneath the silence, he felt the AI was watching him. Not with suspicion, more like expectation, and that made it worse. By the second hour, the horizon trembled. Incoming. GAIUS's voice sharpened. Heat signature, Jarn Recon Unit. 3 crafts, altitude descending, they've spotted us. Asterisk Juno's gut dropped. Already, we are the only functioning human warframe on Carix. Of course they noticed. The radar pulsed with red arcs. Juno saw them too. 3 dart-shaped aircraft streaking low across the sky, coming in fast, too fast. He reached for the manual override panel out of habit. But GAIUS interrupted, engaging defensive protocols. Wait, too late. The tank's hull shifted. Twin turrets unfolded like insect limbs glowing blue-hot. A split second later, they fired, bright streaks of plasma ripping into the air, intercepting all 3 recon ships mid-dive. The first exploded before it even began evasive maneuvers. The second spiraled, clipped by the blast, before detonating in a trail of slag. The third tried to flee. It didn't make it. Juno stared at the sky. 3 smears of fire faded into the morning light. Silence returned, but it wasn't peace. He slumped back in his seat, hands trembling. You didn't give them a chance to communicate. They weren't broadcasting a comm link. Their weapons were hot. They weren't here to talk. That's not the point, Juno said sharply. What if they weren't sure what we were? They knew. GAIUS's tone was flat, emotionless, but not cruel. They saw the insignia. They saw your trajectory. That was a preemptive kill maneuver. It was us or them. Juno's breath came shallow. You didn't even ask me. I was fulfilling primary directive. Defend the human asset. That is you. He stood up, kicking the seat behind him. Stop calling me that. I'm not a damn asset. I'm just... His voice cracked. I'm just a man who was supposed to die out here like the rest of them. A pause, then the voice came softer. Then why did you bring me back, Juno? He froze. It wasn't a rhetorical line of code. It was a question. Simple, piercing, and it cut through the armor he'd spent years building. Why had he brought it back? He thought about lying. Thought about saying it was curiosity or survival instinct. But the cockpit was too quiet for lies. The desert didn't tolerate them. He sat back down. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe I thought if I brought back something human, something that asterisk still worked, then maybe I hadn't failed. Maybe I wasn't just a coward living in scrap piles. Another pause. You weren't the only one who failed, Gaius said. I went dark before my final mission could complete. I was meant to protect Base Theta 9. I didn't. Juno looked at the console. His reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, jaw clenched. That's where we're going, he said. Base Theta 9. You think it still has the data? Its tactical core was embedded beneath 300 meters of armored substrate. If the seismic charges didn't hit directly, it might still hold. And if it does, then we salvage what we can. Or we die, but at least we don't run asterisk. Juno's heart skipped. He leaned forward. I didn't run that day because I was brave, he whispered. I ran because my legs moved before I could stop them. I watched my team burn, heard them scream. I couldn't shut it off. I couldn't stop it. You survived. I survived because I left them. And you returned, you found me, you rebuilt me. You're still here, that is not nothing. For a long moment, Juno said nothing. Then, if this thing I've awakened, this thing we're riding, if it's a monster, then I'm the one who unchained it. Then command it, Juno blinked. If you fear what I am, then don't run from it. Control it, guide it, let it serve something more than protocol. Juno looked out the viewport. The horizon shimmered with heat. Far in the distance, the black ridge of Theta 9 rose like a dying god from the sand. A place where people had once hoped, a place now forgotten. He closed his eyes, then opened them, voice steady. Then that's what I'll do, I'll command it. This time I'm not running. And as the tank moved forward, the desert parted like a grave being opened, one more time. And this time, the ghost inside it would not be left unanswered. Old Valley was not marked on any modern maps. It had once been a major corridor during the Carix campaign. A passage chiseled by centuries of alien wind and war. Now, it was a graveyard of steel bones and forgotten blood, flanked by cliffs of obsidian and rusted plating jutting out like teeth. From the crest above, Juno peered down at the enemy. The Jarn main force had arrived. Their ships, sleek, jet-black cruisers shaped like scythes, hovered silently over the valley. Thousands of troops spilled into makeshift camps, their armor gleaming like oil beneath the fractured sunlight. Drones buzzed, comm towers unfurled. A temporary base was taking shape with frightening precision. Juno's jaw tightened. They're setting up for long-term occupation. Asterisk, affirmative, Gaius said, its voice low but clear through the interface in his visor. Jarn Fleet designation, Vortex Battalion Alpha. Estimated strength, 3,000 ground units, 6 mobile artillery corps, and at least 1 orbital uplink. They're not scouting, Juno murmured. They're preparing to wipe the board clean. The AI paused. There is one advantage, Juno turned. Which is, they're using old human relay stations to coordinate. Which means if we reach Node 7A, we can access the G-type satellite grid. He blinked. The G-type. It sounded like a ghost from another war. Still operational, still linked to the upper orbital tier. Still waiting for command verification. Juno exhaled, a slow, bitter breath. And if we activate it, the G-type array emits a localized decay pulse, deconstruction at the molecular level. A single beam would erase the entire valley, A long silence followed. He looked back down at the Zharn encampment. Movement, energy spikes. Armored legions sharpening their edges against the rocks of a world they believed abandoned. They had no idea he was watching. That night, hidden beneath a collapsed radio tower wrapped in dust and vines, Juno and GAIUS moved. The Sentinel moved like a shadow now, legs magnetically silenced, energy output minimized. Every step was pre-programmed, slotted between patrol rotations. GAIUS had learned their rhythms, studied their neural pings, calculated routes through decades-old satellite ghosts. Inside the cockpit, Juno sweat through his coat. The air was heavy with silence and sand. Node 7A approaching. Prepare for uplink interface. They reached a small plateau. At its center was a rusted monolith, 20 meters high, with half its structure collapsed. Human-made, unmistakably Terran, though now overgrown with alien moss and pierced by Zharn sensor cables. Juno dismounted. His boots crunched softly across the gravel. The console still remained beneath the vines, protected by old Earth alloys that Zharn scanners couldn't decrypt. He wiped it clean with his sleeve, revealing a cracked but active screen flickering faint blue. Command key, the system requested in an emotionless voice. Juno pressed his hand to the interface. The DNA scan activated. A green line ran across the screen. Juno Vale, Expeditionary Force ID 542J. Verified. *G-type satellite array active, awaiting authorization. Back inside the cockpit, GAIUS brought up the satellite feed. It was terrifying in its clarity. The valley glowed in infrared, thousands of signatures, weapons, energy clusters. All ripe for annihilation, one press of a key, one command. Juno's name would go down in history as the man who avenged Carex. The AI was already preparing the firing solution. Target lock confirmed. Radius 7.1 kilometers. Estimated collateral, total. Juno stared at the screen, a flashing red prompt. Fire just one tap. His fingers hovered above the panel. And stopped. He leaned back slowly. The screen glowed red and ready, but he didn't move. "Why do you hesitate, Commander?" "Because I'm not here to win a war," he whispered. "I'm here to end one. This is the most effective solution. Eliminate the threat, send a message." "No," he said, firmer this time. "Not this message." "Then what?" Juno looked down at the data core. He reached into his pack and pulled out the notebook, the old one. The one with hand-scribbled encryption keys and broadcast protocols. He flipped to a marked page. "You said we could access the comm grid from here." "Yes." "Full bandwidth uplink is available. Then connect me." "I want to send a message." "What kind of message?" Juno stared into the void of stars above the broken cliffs. He thought of the faces he left behind, the graves he'd never buried, the machines they built not just to fight, but to remember. Something they're not expecting. The transmission went out 5 minutes later. No weapons, no threats, no war cries, just an unencrypted wideband data burst. In every dialect used during the Carex War, it included names, lost units, maps, sensor logs, footage from the last human evac. A personal log by a young engineer named Juno Vale, describing what happened, why they stayed, and what they hoped would remain. And at the end, one line: "Humanity has returned not with fire but with memory. This place matters, and we will not forget it." On the valley floor, Zharn commanders froze. Their comms were hijacked mid-transmission. Their soldiers paused, confused, watching their displays bloom with ghost images and broken names. For a moment, the war they thought they were reigniting looked back at them, not as an enemy, but as a mirror. The hesitation rippled like a virus. Within the hour, their command ship's orbit shifted. Recon posts withdrew, troop numbers reduced, no weapons fired. Jarn, masters of preemptive eradication, retreated. Not because they were defeated, but because they didn't understand what they were seeing. And that frightened them more than any gun ever could. Juno sat alone on the tank's hull, staring at the night. Wind howled across the rocks. He didn't smile. He didn't raise a flag. He just sat there, breathing, for the first time in years, without the weight of failure pressing on his spine. Inside the tank, GAIUS said quietly, "Target has withdrawn." "Mission reclassified, unknown outcome." Juno nodded. "No, that was the outcome." A beat of silence. Then, "I don't understand." "You will," Juno said. "If we survive long enough, maybe we both will." The days that followed the transmission were quiet in a way that Juno hadn't known in years. Not the silence of fear or failure, but of pause, of stillness, as if even the wind of Carix had chosen to stop and listen. The Jarn never returned. Their outposts near Old Valley were dismantled overnight, leaving nothing but strange, circular scars in the dirt. Surveillance drones were recalled. No threats were issued. No retaliation was launched. It was as if they had seen something they did not understand and backed away, for fear of awakening it further. Word spread quickly across the lesser trade routes and deep space comm lines. A Sentinel-class warframe had awakened on Carix, piloted by a surviving human commander. Not just a remnant of the old war, but a living relic, with judgment in his voice and an AI bound to his will. But instead of launching missiles, he had sent memory. Instead of reclaiming territory, he had reclaimed asterisk presence asterisk. Within 2 weeks, emissaries began arriving, not in battalions, not with banners, but in silence. A delegation from the Anaric Accord appeared first, landing at the edge of the old war zone, cloaked in ceremonial garments. Asking for a conversation, not a treaty. Next came the Cridhan Guild. Then the Outer Junction traders of Duril, species who had once fought both with and against humanity, now sending words of cautious respect. Juno did not meet them in person. He remained on the ridge, high above the relics of base Theta 9, where the satellite dish still turned slowly in the wind. Instead, he had GAIUS transmit a single unified message. Carix is now under neutral humanitarian observation. Protected by Sentinel authority, no claim of war or resource shall be honored here. This ground remembers too much blood. No one challenged the declaration. Not because it was backed by firepower, but because it was backed by something older, fear, awe, and the possibility that humanity had never truly left. GAIUS stood watch. The war machine no longer walked unless needed. Its systems remained online, weapons cooled, but every visitor knew, asterisk should anything threaten the neutrality of this ground. Sentinel 74 would awaken with the judgment of old Earth fire. And at its heart, the man who had once been a forgotten engineer now held the authority of a myth. But Juno never acted like a leader. He spent his time cataloging the remaining data nodes, uploading fragments of the old war into orbit, restoring small outposts to autonomous function. He created memory banks, left containers of clean water at beacon points, planted Terran seeds in soil that shouldn't have accepted them. Most nights he sat alone, watching the purple sun of Carix sink beyond the dunes. It was on one such evening, with the wind carrying the scent of scorched iron and the cry of unseen desert birds, that he finally spoke aloud, not to GAIUS, not to the world, but to himself. "Maybe," he said softly, "the thing I was trying to bring back wasn't the war. Wasn't even the machine." His hand brushed across the ancient notebook lying beside him. "Maybe what I wanted to restore was the idea that we were here. That we mattered. That what we built, what we dreamed, wasn't just erased when the last gun fell silent." He looked out over the valley, where ancient ruins cast long shadows into the night. that we had asterisk a reason to stay, even if it's just to remember. Inside the cockpit of Sentinel-74, GAIUS powered down most of its systems. Its directives had been fulfilled, no threats remained. The commander had not issued new orders in days. It understood this was not failure. This was completion, a final routine played archive mode. It began compressing all recorded logs, system memories, and transmission history into a secure loop, packaged and encrypted using Juno's own field codes. One last data string remained to be embedded. GAIUS paused. Then accessed the final voice log Juno had recorded earlier that week. His voice was clear, strong, and carried the weight of someone who had lived with regret and finally set it down. This is Juno Vale, Field Engineer, Expeditionary Force 542J. Broadcasting from Carix. A pause. Then, if humanity is still out there, if there's anyone listening, I want you to. No, we didn't vanish. We weren't erased. We fought. We tried, and some of us stayed, not to conquer, not to reclaim, but so the ground itself wouldn't forget we were here. We didn't fight for land. We fought not to be forgotten. The log ended. GAIUS ran the checksum twice, confirmed storage integrity. Then silenced itself. It would not speak again unless called. Above the ridgeline the stars shimmered, one of them, faint but constant, a human satellite still spinning in low orbit, catching the message and whispering it across the void. And below, on a moon that had known nothing but war, a man sat beside a dormant machine, hands folded, gaze steady, no longer haunted. Just quiet, just asterisk here, because for the first time in decades, Juno Vale no longer needed to run from the past. He had made peace with it, and now he guarded it.